This story is from way back when I was only 19 years old. At the time, I still lived with my parents and I desperately felt the need for my own space. I had a job, but it didn't pay much. I just wasn't making enough money to have a place of my own. Hence, my temporary solution to the problem was to go on long hikes every weekend. It's not that I didn't love my parents or that they were bad parents. It's the opposite. I loved them dearly and they were and still are wonderful parents. It's merely something that comes to you naturally as you age, the need for independence. That said, I went on a hike one Saturday and the plan was to be out there for at least 8 hours. I first began hiking 1 hour, then that increased to 2, and eventually as I got fitter, I could hike all day and still feel pretty fresh when I come home. The time was about 4 in the afternoon and I had hiked for about 6 hours by then. I wasn't all that tired, but my feet hurt a lot on that day. It was a problem with the shoes. I had purchased a new pair of boots and didn't have the foresight to break them in before the long hike. Only a fool would go on a long hike in a pair of new boots. But yeah, it was 4 p.m., my feet were hurting, but that was the least of my problems. The thing is, I had actually gotten myself lost in the woods. I think I got a little too confident having hiked at that location multiple times. I got a little carried away and hiked a little too far into the woods. It was nearly pitch black by 7 p.m. and I was quite scared by then. I never told my parents the areas where I normally hike at. Not to mention, I often slept over at my buddies on Saturday nights. If I got lost out there, my parents would have no reason to worry and therefore no reason to call for help. By 8 p.m., I was aimlessly walking through the woods until something promising finally showed up. It was a cabin. I walked toward it and when I was at a close distance, I announced myself in case someone was already in there. After several hellos, no one answered, so I proceeded to walk to the door, then tried opening it, and it opened even smoother than my own bedroom door. I fully expected the cabin to be a home to someone due to the impeccable condition of the door. But when I went inside, I didn't find any signs of recent use, so I made myself at home. I ate a little bit of the emergency provision I take with me on my hikes. I also made fire in the fireplace, melted some snow, then I drank a little and also topped off my canteen. After that, I slept like a baby and woke up the next morning. After a quick breakfast, I thought to myself, that was actually not bad. I had a good night's sleep and for the first time in my life, it felt as though I had my own place. Yeah, I really enjoyed this cabin, and then I left. I walked for about 3 hours and I couldn't find anything that hinted nearby civilization. I continued walking for another hour, then another and another until nighttime had come again. I was lost again and I had no means to go back to the cabin either. I remember thinking how much I wanted to be back in that cozy and warm cabin. Then, not long after that, like magic, the cabin was only a few meters in front of me. As much as I was glad, it all seemed impossible how I could have gone back to that exact location. Think about it, I had walked something like 10 hours that day. In all the immense space out there, what are the chances of me ending up in the same location where I started my day? 1 in a million? A billion? I don't know, but the odds have to be slim, no? And yet, there I was, right back at the cabin. It's not like I had any other choices, so I made fire, ate tiny dinner, melted some more snow, then went to sleep. Come next morning, I tried finding the main trail again and failed again. Come nighttime, the thought of wanting to be back at the cabin had returned. Then, not long after, the cabin magically showed up again. The same thing repeated for the next 4 days, and by that point, all I could think about was being back at home, in my own bedroom, sleeping on my own bed, and having dinner with my parents. On the morning of the 5th day, I really wanted to cry as my head was filled with the thoughts of home and my parents. I just wanted to go home. Then after 6 hours of walk, I had finally found the first sign of civilization. I had found the main trail. I arrived at home at 6 in the evening. As soon as I entered the house, Mom burst into tears and she hugged me like I was a little child again. This could have been a happier ending if not for the fact that there was a discrepancy in the passage of time between me and the rest of the world. If you remember, I told you that I was lost for 5 days. I managed to find my way back home on the 5th day of being lost out there. Having said that, in actuality, in the world outside of the forest, I had gone missing for a full month. Now, one could say that I was mistaken, that perhaps the shock and desperation of being lost out there made me remember things differently. But if that's so, then how do you explain me surviving on those tiny rationed meals? No matter how small portions I might have rationed my meals, there's no way that I could survive for 30 days on the emergency rations alone. Aside from that, what about my beard? I take after my father and I grow some thick set of beards. Yeah, even at 19, I looked more manly than most men twice my age. When I came home, my beard was at just about the length I would have grown in 5 days. There was no explaining that. Anyway, I didn't make it a big issue because for one, I was just too happy to be back home. And also, what good would it have done arguing about the length of time that I was lost with the authorities and my parents? Nothing really. As for the cabin, I've got theories on some aspects of its functions. I think it only appears to those who desperately seek solitude. I also think it won't let you go until you genuinely seek companionship again. It's just a theory. As for the discrepancy in the passage of time, I've got no answers for that. There's no doubt in my mind that it'll forever remain a mystery. I'm not much of an outdoor person. I don't enjoy sports, I hate driving, and I'm definitely not fond of camping or hiking. That being said, I said yes to go on a hike the other day because there's this guy that I like at work and he asked me if I wanted to go hiking with him. I lied to him that I actually love the outdoors. A few days later, I was hiking in some forest pretending to love the activity. We walked for about half an hour and I was already tired. I tried my best to make it seem like I was totally fine, but my date told me that we should turn back and go to a coffee shop or something to drink something hot. I think it caught on to my BS, so we turned around. We were maybe 5 minutes out from the parking lot, and that's when everything went dark around me. When I say dark, I don't mean it in a way that I couldn't see anything. It was weird because I could see my hands and body just fine, but everything around me was all black. Not to mention, my date had disappeared as well. I looked in every direction, but all I could see was that I was walking on a hard black surface. When I looked up, it was just more darkness. I was basically in the middle of nothingness. And there was nowhere to go since everywhere looked the same. I tried walking in a straight line for about 5 minutes, and without any warning, I was suddenly blinded by a bright light and I let out a scream. I covered my eyes and stayed still. That's when I heard someone running towards me, and then I heard the voice say, "Are you okay? What happened to you? Can you look at me?" So this is what happened from the point of view of my date. He tells me that I disappeared right in front of his eyes. We were walking and talking, but he was looking at me the whole time, and so he had a clear view of me vanishing into thin air. He searched for me in the nearby area, and I was nowhere to be found. Roughly about 10 minutes later, he heard my scream and came running to find me in the parking lot. He drove me home after that, and that date ended up becoming our first and last. What happened to me was too difficult to explain. Or maybe I should say that it was impossible to explain. There was no point in us discussing about the happening, and we sort of felt awkward to be around each other. Needless to say, I never went hiking again, and I probably never will for as long as I'm alive.